My brother told me he had the house cleaned while I was away. The next call I got was from my neighbor, and she sounded like she had just seen something she should not have. It was Friday morning, October 13th, 2023, around 9:20, and I was standing in a logistics control office outside Norfolk, trying to figure out why 6 pieces of equipment had turned into 5 on paper. That is the kind of problem my job deals with. Not explosions, not shouting, just small numbers that do not add up and people who hope no one looks too closely. My phone buzzed again. Linda Warner. She lives next door to me. She is not dramatic. She does not call unless there is a reason. I stepped out into the hallway and answered. She did not say hello. She said my name like she needed to be sure I was actually there. Mara? I said yes. She took a breath and said something that made me stop thinking about work entirely. Mara. That was not cleaning. For a second, I thought she meant Ryan had done a bad job, left a mess, bark something. That would have been annoying, but normal for him. Then she kept talking. She said there had been a white truck outside my house after 2 in the morning on Wednesday. Then another one late Thursday night. No logos, no uniforms. Men going in and out, like they did not want to be noticed, but also did not expect to be questioned. I asked her what they were carrying. She hesitated, then said, "Not what you would expect. No mops, no buckets, no normal vacuum." She said they had hard cases, heavy contractor bags, rolls of clear plastic, and one of them was wearing white coveralls, like he was trying not to take anything with him when he left. I leaned against the wall without realizing it. In my line of work, details matter more than tone. I asked her if she saw anything with hoses, anything that looked like it moved air instead of picking up dust. She went quiet. Then she said, "Yes, a boxy machine, low to the ground, with thick tubing." I asked if the bags looked pre-sealed or if they tied them on site. She said they came ready. That was when her voice changed. "My son did maintenance for years," she said. "I have seen cleaning. This looked like containment." I closed my eyes for a second. That word does not get used by accident. I asked if anyone had taken pictures. She said one man did. The kitchen floor, part of the wall, something near the basement door. Then she lowered her voice even more. Around 2:40, she said, she heard a heavy thud, like something hitting wood or tile. She stepped out onto her patio and looked through the gap in the fence. She said she could see into my kitchen because the back door was open, but there was plastic hung inside like a barrier. And behind it, there was a man, standing still in the dark, looking straight in her direction. Not moving, not saying anything. Then he reached over and pulled the door shut. No apology, no explanation. "I almost called 911, she said. "I only did not because it is your house." I did not answer right away. I was thinking about Ryan, about the message he sent me the day before. "Do not worry, I had the place cleaned." At the time, it sounded helpful. Now, it sounded like something else entirely. People do not bring sealed bags, plastic sheeting, and air machines into a quiet house at 3 in the morning unless they are afraid of what is already inside. And the worst part was not that something had happened in my house. It was that my brother had decided my house was the right place to make it disappear. This is a fictional story. All characters and events are not real. I am 26 years old, a captain, and if you asked most people in my family what that meant, they would tell you something about paperwork and schedules and moving things from one place to another. They are not entirely wrong. I do not kick down doors or lead anything dramatic. I work in Logistics Irregularities Review, which is a long way of saying I look at records that are supposed to make sense and find the places where they do not. Supply loss, contractor billing, coded invoices, access logs that do not match timelines. The quiet parts of a system where people assume no one is paying attention. A few months before this, I spent 3 days figuring out why a pallet marked as delivered in Georgia showed up on a report in North Carolina without ever being signed for in between. I do not look at objects. I look at the traces people leave when they think they have covered themselves well enough. My brother Ryan is 5 years older than me. He speaks easily, laughs at the right moments, apologizes in ways that make people want to forgive him before they understand what he is apologizing for. In my mother's eyes, Ryan is human in a way I am not. In mine, he is the kind of person who makes decisions and lets someone else pay the final cost. Linda Warner has lived next door to me for 8 years. She is in her 60s, steady, observant, and not the kind of neighbor who interferes unless something is clearly wrong. By the time she called me that morning, I already knew I was not walking back into a misunderstanding. Ryan never breaks things loudly. He finishes what he is doing, then lets everyone else call it a misunderstanding. Have you noticed the calmest person in a family is usually the one everyone assumes can absorb one more mess? The last time I saw Ryan before that call was Tuesday evening, October 10th, 2023, a few hours before I left for what was supposed to be a short work assignment. We were at my parents' place, the kind of dinner that always starts with something simple and ends with a quiet negotiation nobody admits is happening. My mother had made too much food, like she always did when she wanted things to feel normal. My father sat at the head of the table, saying very little but watching everything. Ryan leaned back in his chair like he had already decided how the night would go. At some point between clearing plates and refilling glasses, he said it casually, like it had already been agreed on. "I can swing by your place while you're gone. Just check on things. Make sure nothing goes wrong." I did not answer right away. It was not that I did not trust him to lock a door or turn off a light. It was that I knew how easily my space stopped being mine when Ryan was involved. My mother stepped in before I could say anything. "It will be good for someone to check on the place. You are not there. Houses need eyes on them." I said I had systems in place, neighbors who kept an eye out, and that I would only be gone a few days. Ryan smiled, like I had just proven his point. "You always act like your house is Fort Knox." It was said lightly, like a joke, but it landed the way those jokes always do. My mother followed it with something softer that somehow cut deeper. "Your brother is helping you. Try not to interrogate him before he has even done anything." My father nodded once, as if that settled it. "Mara is great with rules," he said, "but Ryan is better with people." That was the version of me they preferred, the one who was technically right, but socially exhausting. Ryan picked up my spare key from the counter and spun it once between his fingers, not asking, not waiting, just holding it like it had always belonged to him. It was a small movement, almost nothing, but it stayed with me longer than anything else said that night. I remember thinking how strange it was that I had to explain why I wanted my own home to stay untouched. My mother added one more line as she stacked plates. "She is in the army. She probably trusts filing cabinets more than family." Ryan laughed and leaned forward. "You move boxes for the government. I can handle one house for 3 days." I let it go. Not because it made sense, but because pushing back would have turned me into the problem in that room. That is how it usually works. By the time I grabbed my bag and headed for the door, the decision had already been made for me. Ryan followed me out, still easy, still relaxed, like nothing about this required permission. As I reached my car, he called out one more thing, almost as an afterthought. "The basement is still locked, right?" I paused for half a second, long enough to notice it, not long enough to question it out loud. "Yeah," I said, then got in the car and drove off. When people joke about your boundaries long enough, do you start wondering which boundary they plan to cross next? Linda did not tell me everything at once. She told it the way people do when they are trying to stay calm, one detail at a time, each one more specific than the last, until the pattern became impossible to ignore. She said it started the night after I left. Wednesday, October 11th. A white truck pulled up late, well past midnight. No logo, no markings, nothing that made it look like a normal service vehicle. Two men got out, moved quickly, did not linger, and went straight inside. She watched from her kitchen window because the timing alone felt wrong. She said they did not carry anything you would expect from someone cleaning a house. No mops, no buckets, nothing simple. They carried weight, something heavy enough that she could hear it drag across my floor through the quiet of the street. Then the curtains closed, all at once, like someone had decided the house should not be visible anymore. The next night, Thursday, October 12th, it escalated. Another vehicle, different shape, same lack of markings. More people this time. She said she could see plastic from the back angle of the house, something clear hanging inside like a barrier. Not decoration, not protection for furniture, something more deliberate. She said the smell reached her yard, sharp and chemical, not the kind you get from cleaning products you buy at a store. Then there were sounds, not just movement, but prying, like wood being pulled or lifted, like something fixed was being undone. She stayed up longer than she normally would, just listening. By early Friday morning around 2:30, she saw one of them clearly. White coveralls, hood down, gloves on. They carried something long, wrapped tightly in plastic. Not loose, not casual, but sealed in a way that suggested it was not supposed to be seen. That was when she heard it. One of them said, "We are not leaving traces in there." I did not respond right away when she repeated that line to me. That word does not belong in a normal house. Not in that context. Not at that hour. Whatever Ryan thought he had done, whatever he thought he had cleaned, it was no longer something you could explain away with a joke or a quick apology. Linda took a breath before adding the last detail. She had taken a picture of one of the trucks. She had the license plate. If you heard strangers talking about traces in your house, would you still wait for a family explanation first? I got back to my house Friday afternoon, October 13th, around 4:40. Later than I planned, but early enough that the street still felt like itself. Nothing outside looked wrong. No broken glass, no obvious damage, no sign that anything had happened. From the curb, it looked like the same house I had locked 3 days earlier. That was the first thing that felt off. It was too normal. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside, and the air hit me before anything else did. It was clean in a way that did not belong to the place. Not fresh, not lived in, just stripped. The smell of lemon cleaner sat over everything, sharp and artificial, covering the familiar scent of wood and fabric I was used to. It did not blend, it replaced. The living room was neat, almost staged, nothing out of place, nothing personal enough to feel like it had been touched recently. I stood there for a few seconds longer than I needed to, letting my eyes adjust, letting the quiet settle into something I could read. Then I started walking. The hallway toward the kitchen was where it began to show. A section of baseboard near the doorway was newer than the rest, the color just slightly off if you knew where to look. Not something most people would notice. I noticed. I kept going. Near the kitchen island, 2 floor panels caught the light differently. Same material, same cut, but the finish did not match. They were too smooth, too recent. I shifted my weight and felt the difference under my shoe. Something had been removed and replaced. I moved a chair slightly and saw it. A mark that had been there for years was gone. Not faded, gone. The chair itself was not in the exact position I had left it in either, just enough off that I could tell someone had reset the room instead of simply cleaning it. The wall near the pantry had a patch, a small section where the paint had been redone. It was careful work, but not perfect. You could see the edge if you knew the wall before. I reached the basement door and stopped. The handle had been wiped down more thoroughly than anything else in the house. No smudges, no texture, just a flat, over-cleaned surface. That was not normal. I did not touch it. Instead, I stepped back and pulled out my phone. Not because I was trying to be dramatic, but because this was how I worked. I took a wide shot of the kitchen, then moved closer. Detail shots. Angles that showed the difference in the floor, the baseboard, the wall patch. I crouched and took a picture of a small machine tucked near the corner, something they must have missed. It still had a serial sticker on it. That mattered. I straightened up slowly and looked around again. It looked clean. The way a forged signature looks neat. The kind of clean that tells you someone made decisions about what should remain and what should not. I walked outside to the trash bins, lifted the lid, and saw it almost immediately. A piece of clear plastic sheeting, cut unevenly, still carrying a contractor label on one edge. Have you ever felt more disrespected by what was quietly changed than by anything anybody said out loud? I went to my parents' house the next morning, Saturday, October 14th, early enough that the air still carried the quiet from the night before. Ryan was already there, sitting at the table like nothing had shifted. My mother moved between the kitchen and dining area, pretending this was just another normal morning. My father had a newspaper open in front of him, though I did not see him turn a single page. I did not sit. I stood at the edge of the table and looked at Ryan long enough that he had to acknowledge me. Then I asked, simple and direct, "What happened in my kitchen?" He smiled like I had just asked something unnecessary. "Your kitchen got cleaned. You are welcome." My mother stepped in before I could respond. "Do not do that tone, Mara. It is a house, not a crime scene." My father folded the edge of his paper and spoke without looking up. "If you are upset about a wall getting touched up, I think we can survive this as a family." I let a second pass, just enough to feel the weight of what they were choosing not to see. Then I said it without raising my voice. "People do not remove trim when they vacuum." There was a brief pause. Not long, but enough. I added one more line. "Housekeepers do not use containment plastic." The word sat there. My mother looked at me like I had just made something small into something ridiculous. Ryan laughed, but it did not land the same way this time. It came out a little sharper, a little faster than he meant it to. "This is why nobody can help you," he said. "Everything is a report, a protocol, a scene." I watched him carefully. I was not trying to win the argument. I was trying to see what he would give away. "You are not in some movie, Mara," he added, leaning back like he was settling it. "You audit boxes." That was the version of me he needed to believe in, the one who could not connect what she saw to what it meant. I did not react to that, not because it did not matter, but because reacting would have ended the conversation too early. My mother shook her head slightly, disappointed in me, not in him. That was the part that stayed with me more than anything Ryan said. I was not hurt by his tone. I was used to that. What stayed with me was that she heard the words containment plastic and chose to look at me like I was overreacting. Ryan reached for his coffee, then stopped himself for a fraction of a second before saying, "I already told the contractor to handle it." The name he used was not one I had mentioned. I let it sit. If someone slipped on one detail you never gave them, would you stay quiet a little longer just to learn more? I did not go back to my parents' house after that conversation. I went home, closed the door, and started working the way I always do when something does not add up. It was Saturday afternoon, October 14th, and by the time the light shifted across the kitchen floor, I had already moved past the question of what Ryan said and into what I could verify. I began with Linda. She sent me the photos she had taken and the short clips from her security camera. Then I knocked on two other doors down the street, neighbors who had cameras angled toward the road. I kept it simple. I asked for footage from the nights of October 11th and 12th. People are more willing to help when you do not dramatize the request. By early evening, I had enough to map movement. 2 vehicles, different shapes, same time windows. I paused frames and wrote down the license plates. One of them was clear enough to run. I did not need access to anything restricted for that. Public records gave me a starting point. The plate tied to a company name. The company name tied to an EIN. From there it was routine. Business registry entries, listed services, previous filings. I pulled the invoice header from the label I had photographed on the plastic in my trash and matched the code. It was not residential cleaning. It was categorized under remediation. That mattered. It meant the work was not about making something look good. It was about removing evidence of something that had already happened. I compared the billing address attached to the transaction with my own. It matched. Ryan had not just used my house. He had used my address as the official location tied to the service. I sat back for a moment, letting that settle, then picked up my phone and called someone I trusted to read this kind of pattern without needing it explained twice. Evan Pike answered on the second ring. He had worked with our team on a contractor overbilling issue months earlier. I gave him the company name and the header code. He did not ask me to slow down. He did not ask me why I was calling on a Saturday. Captain Ellison, if you are calling me on a Saturday, I am assuming this is not domestic drama. Send me the invoice header. If it is who I think it is, you just tripped something bigger. I sent it. He went quiet for a few seconds, then said he would look into it and call me back. That was enough. It told me I was not overreading this. While I waited, my phone buzzed again with a separate call. Sergeant First Class Nolan Reed. He was following up on an unrelated matter, something routine, but when I mentioned the contractor name in passing, his tone changed immediately. Ma'am, if Pike is involved, do not let your brother touch anything else in that house. He did not explain further. He did not need to. That was not how people spoke to someone who moved boxes. I went back to the footage and built a simple timeline. Vehicles arriving late, activity inside, departure times. Then I cross-checked with local urgent care records that were publicly logged for after-hours visits. One entry stood out. Late-night intake near Chesapeake, time-stamped within the same window as the activity at my house. A pickup matching one of the vehicles appeared briefly in another camera angle near that location. That was enough to suggest someone had been hurt that night. Not a guess, a pattern. By Sunday morning, October 15th, I was not trying to figure out if something had happened. I was mapping how it had been handled after it happened. Ryan had not panicked because my house was messy. He had acted because something had occurred inside a property tied to someone in uniform. Someone he assumed would be the last person questioned if the details stayed quiet. He had chosen my house because it looked like a safe place to move a problem through. The more I lined up the pieces, the clearer it became that this was not just about my kitchen or my floor. The contractor he used had a history that did not sit clean. Evan called back just after 9. This may not be only about what happened in your house, he said. Your brother may have used the wrong contractor at the wrong address. When someone mistakes your quiet job for a small one, do you ever wonder how shocked they would be by what you actually know? By Sunday afternoon, October 15th, I was no longer guessing. I had enough to place the pieces in order without needing anyone in my family to confirm them for me. Ryan had not just checked on my house while I was away. He had used it. He had invited 2 contractors he was working with and a few people who moved in the same circle he did. It was not some wild event or anything that would draw attention from the outside. It was the kind of gathering that looks harmless from a distance. Drinks on the counter, voices getting louder as the night went on. People talking about contracts, about money, about who knew who and how fast things could move if you did not ask too many questions. It happened inside my kitchen, around the island I had walked past the day before. The same floor that now reflected light in the wrong places. At some point, one of them had too much to drink. It did not take anything dramatic, just a misstep near the edge of the island, a loss of balance, and then impact. The corner of the stone caught him on the way down. The cabinet glass took the rest. There would have been blood. There would have been broken pieces. There would have been a moment where everything in that room stopped, and everyone understood this was no longer something you could laugh off and clean in the morning. That was where Ryan made his decision. He did not call for help through the channels that would ask questions. He did not want anyone looking at the people in that room or the items they had brought with them. Some of them should not have been there. Some of the materials and equipment in that space did not belong in a private residence, and certainly not one tied to someone in uniform. If anyone official showed up, the first question would not be what happened. It would be why it happened there. So he chose a different solution. He called a service he already knew, one that did not ask unnecessary questions. One that specialized in making things disappear in a way that looked clean afterward. He paid them, and when it was done, he sent me a message that said he had the place cleaned. What he had actually done was remove the version of that night that would have caused problems for him. And the part that settled heavier than anything else was not the damage itself. It was the choice behind it. My house was not just available, it was useful. The address carried weight. The association made things look controlled, contained, manageable. He had not chosen it because it was empty. He had chosen it because it was mine. That was the part that stayed. That was the part that did not fade with the smell of cleaner or the replacement of wood. By the time I finished mapping it out, there was only one question left that mattered. How much of this did my family already know? I thought back to the conversation at the table, the way my mother spoke, the way she dismissed what I said without asking a single follow-up. It was not confusion. It was a choice. She knew enough to understand something had happened. She chose to believe Ryan had handled it. What would cut deeper for you? The damage itself? Or learning they trusted your reputation more than they respected you? Monday evening, October 16th at 6:30, I was back at my parents' house, sitting at the same table where everything had been reduced to a misunderstanding 2 days earlier. The room looked the same plates, the same quiet background noise, the same attempt to make everything feel contained. Ryan sat across from me, more relaxed than he had been on Saturday, like he believed the worst part had already passed. My mother moved between the kitchen and the table, rehearsing normalcy. My father watched without speaking, the way he always did when he preferred not to take a side until he knew which one would hold. Ryan started before anyone else could. "Can we not do the military courtroom thing tonight?" he said, leaning back slightly. "It was a mess. It got cleaned. We move on." My mother followed it with the line she thought would settle everything. "Mara, you do not always have to win." That was the moment they had decided the shape of the conversation. Not what happened, not who was responsible, just whether I would let it go. I did not interrupt. I let them finish. I let the room settle into the version of events they were comfortable with. Then I placed my laptop on the table and opened it without looking at anyone. You are right, I said. It got cleaned. I paused just long enough for the words to land the way they expected. Then I added, that is what made it a problem. I turned the screen toward them. The first clip showed a vehicle pulling up at 2:13 in the morning, headlights cutting across the front of my house. The next showed two men moving quickly, carrying sealed bins, not loose bags, not anything casual. I let it play for a few seconds, then paused and brought up the invoice. Not a receipt, a structured document with codes, categories, line items. Trim removal, surface treatment, deodorization, not cleaning, remediation. I clicked to the photos I had taken. The baseboard, the replaced floor panels, the patched wall. Then the timestamp from an urgent care facility near Chesapeake, aligned with the same window the vehicles appeared in the footage. No speculation, just sequence. I closed the file and looked at Ryan. You did not clean my house, I said. You paid to sanitize a lie. He shook his head immediately. You are twisting this. You set me up. I did not raise my voice. No. You used my house because you thought I would be the last person in the room who understood what those invoices meant. My mother went still. My father finally looked up, really looked, not at me, but at the screen in front of him. That was when my phone lit up on the table. I did not reach for it right away. I let it ring once, then twice, then I answered and placed it on speaker. Evan Pike's voice came through, clear and steady. Captain Ellison, I reviewed the invoice chain. The contractor is now part of an active irregularities referral. Do not let your brother dispose of anything else. We will need statements. The room went quiet in a way it had not before. Not uncomfortable, not tense, just empty of denial. A second later, my phone buzzed again with a message. I glanced at it, then read it out loud without emphasis. Ma'am, command wants a written note by 800. They are aware the address is yours. I set the phone down. That was all it took. Not a raised voice, not a threat, just the weight of a system they had not considered becoming real in front of them. Ryan had spent the last 2 days reducing my work to boxes and reports. Now it was those same reports, those same codes, those same timelines that closed in around him. He looked at me like he was trying to find a version of me that had not been there the whole time. You set me up, he repeated. But it was weaker now. Not an accusation, just something he needed to say to keep his footing. I shook my head once. No. You chose the one place you thought no one would question you. You were wrong. My mother did not speak. My father did not interrupt. There was nothing left for them to translate into something easier. By the time dinner ended, no one was pretending it had been a misunderstanding. Ryan followed me outside as I walked toward my car. The night air was cooler than it had been all week. He stopped a few steps behind me and said it quietly, without the ease he had carried before. Do not let this go formal. Please. If the same people who mocked your work suddenly learned it could bury their lies, would that feel like justice or just timing? Tuesday morning, October 17th, did not feel like a continuation of a family argument. It felt like something had shifted into a space where explanations stopped working. By mid-morning, the contractor tied to the invoice chain had already been contacted and asked to come in for review. Not a dramatic sweep, not anything loud, just a quiet pull into a process that does not move quickly, but does not forget either. Ryan was told to preserve everything. His phone, his receipts, his messages, every contact tied to that night. No one used the word investigation in front of him, but the structure around him changed in a way that made the word unnecessary. At home, the tone shifted just as fast. My mother called me before noon, her voice softer than it had been the night before, but not different in the way that mattered. She did not apologize. She did not ask what really happened. She asked if there was any way I could soften the wording, maybe make it sound less formal, less final. My father stayed quiet in the background, which was its own kind of answer. The same people who told me I was making it bigger than it was were now asking me to keep it contained, as if the size of the truth depended on how gently I described it. I realized then that no one had changed sides because they understood me. They changed because, for the first time, Ryan might not be able to walk away from something he started. That was the only line that had moved. The rest of it stayed exactly the same. By the time Wednesday morning came, the house felt quieter. Not because anything was resolved, but because there was nothing left to argue about. Then my phone lit up with a message from Ryan. "I need to see you. No one else. Please." Do people ever seem sorry to you? Or just suddenly aware that sorry might be cheaper than consequences? Wednesday afternoon, October 18th, Ryan showed up at my house without calling again. He did not walk in the way he used to, like the door was just a suggestion. He stopped on the front step and waited. That was the first difference. When I opened the door, he stayed outside, hands in his pockets, like he was trying to figure out where he was allowed to stand now. "You know how this system works," he said, not looking at me directly. "You can explain context. If this goes all the way, it ruins everything." He spoke carefully, like each sentence had been practiced, like he believed if he said it the right way, it might still turn into something manageable. What he did not say was just as clear. He did not say he was sorry for using my house. He did not say he should not have put my address into something that never should have touched it. He only talked about what he might lose. I let the silence sit between us long enough for that to be obvious. Then I answered, "You used my house because you thought I could absorb the fallout." He shifted, finally meeting my eyes. "I can read a system, Ryan. That does not mean I owe you a way out of it." He tried once more, softer this time. "I am your brother." I nodded slightly. "That should have mattered before you made my address part of your cleanup plan." He looked past me into the house, and that was when he noticed the keypad on the door. The code had been changed. The spare access he always assumed was there was gone before he even thought to ask for it. If the person who counted on your strength only returned when they needed it, could you shut the door and mean it? By the end of October 2023, the house felt like mine again in a way it had not in a long time. Not because anything dramatic had happened, but because the quiet inside it was honest. I brought in a contractor I had worked with before, someone who documented everything clearly, someone who did not erase problems, but fixed them in a way that could be accounted for. The replaced trim was redone properly. The patched wall was sanded and painted without hiding what had been done before. The floor panels were adjusted until they matched the rest of the room, instead of standing out like a correction someone hoped no one would question. I removed the spare key. There was no longer a copy sitting in someone else's drawer under the assumption that it might be needed. The keypad code was mine alone, not shared, not implied, not something anyone else could guess. I kept one small mark on the leg of a chair, a shallow scratch that could have been sanded out, but was not. It stayed there as a reminder that truth does not live in what people cover over. It lives in what remains after they try. The house was finally clean. This time, nobody had to lie for it. Have you ever learned that peace does not start with forgiveness, but with changing who still gets a key?